Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our fourth Equally Inclusive Disability Confident event. My name is Joanne Van. I'm the Integration Lead for Seetec Plus in the West of England. And just to give you a flavour, integration is the partnership and collaboration part of the business, where we ensure that we build strong relationships with employers, interventions and stakeholders to ensure we get the most benefit for our customers. I'm your host for today. I'm really looking forward to it. So let's let you know what's coming up. So this is the first of a two-part series, and I'm pleased to be joined by some guest speakers. So we have Apex HR, who are presenting how to do HR differently, challenging traditional recruitment practices and suggesting ways to be more inclusive in our approach to recruitment and retention. Seetec Plus will focus on supporting people with mental health neurodiversity conditions, and the RNIB will focus on supporting people with sight loss in an ageing workforce. So we would love your input in today's session and to be interactive. So it would be great if you could let everyone know in the chat your name, which company you're from, and what you'd like to get out of today. Feel free to post any questions throughout the webinar, which we can pose to our guest panel towards the end of the event. You can do this via Facebook comments, or you can WhatsApp us on, forgive me, I haven't quite learnt the number off by heart. It's 01872 228 844. Later on, we'll also be joined by Beth O'Leary, our marketing coordinator, who's monitoring those questions we receive and who will be putting them to our panel of speakers. Okay, feedback is very important to us and helps us to perform better and shape our content for future events. So fairly shortly, you should have a QR code to be visible on your screen. There we go, there it is, as if by magic. We would really appreciate your feedback. So if you could hold your phone up to the code and scan the code using your camera, complete our quick online feedback form. This will also be available at the end of the seminar. Unfortunately, our signer, is that correct? Yeah, our signer is unable to be with us today. However, if you would like a signed version of the event, please put your details in the chat and we'll make sure this is emailed over to you. And if you want to access the subtitles, please click on the CC button on the bottom ribbon band. That seemed like a bit of a tongue twister then, but I think I got there. So welcome once again. In this series, we're going to explore how and when people with disabilities should disclose and how we can support them by making reasonable adjustments in the workplace from different employers' perspective. Okay. The term what is reasonable really depends on the specific situation and highlights the importance of being uniquely person-led. So disabled people have found to be at a significant disadvantage when applying for job vacancies, especially through traditional screening and recruitment practices, such as relying on application forms, CVs, reference checks and cover letters. Thinking differently about the traditional recruitment process will help identify more inclusive ways to assess a disabled person's potential and improve the disabled candidate experience. A great way to advocate fairness and equality in the workplace is to become a member of the Disability Confidence Scheme. Working in collaboration with DWP employability providers such as Seetec Plus will help explore alternative ways to recruit people with disabilities and support them through the critical period of onboarding. Our guest speakers are here to give us their inclusion top tips and share best practice that have benefited not only their business profile in the community, but also their workforce. And before I introduce our first guest, we would like you to take part in a Slido poll. So the question is, how many working days were lost in the UK due to work-related stress, depression or anxiety in 2021 to 2022? So your four answers are 9 million, 13 million, 17 million or 24 million. And I will share the answer with you a little later in the webinar. But for now, I'd like to welcome our first guest. So good morning, where am I? Good afternoon, Lisa from Apex HR is here. Lisa, I believe you're going to deliver a presentation on disability confidence through the lens of HR to help organisations remove recruitment practice barriers and help steer us to do things differently.
That's correct. Yes, Joe. Thank you for having me this afternoon. So good afternoon, everybody. Like Joe said, I'm here to talk to you about the importance of inclusive recruitment and selection for individuals with physical and mental impairments from a HR point of view. As we all know, diversity and inclusion are crucial for any organisation to thrive, and this includes diversity in terms of disability. If we go to the next slide, please, I'm going to talk about the benefits of recruiting people with disabilities. And unfortunately, many employers shy away from recruiting people with disabilities because they make assumptions on that group of people that will have high absence levels, or making reasonable adjustments are just too costly, or they won't have the ability to do the role. But actually, research and surveys has demonstrated that recruiting people with disabilities can actually increase diversity and innovation within the workplace, as they bring unique perspectives and experiences to the workplace, and often different problem-solving skills and approaches to work. They also improve employee retention and loyalty, because surveys have shown that employees with disabilities tend to have higher retention rates and greater loyalty to their customers, because they face such additional barriers in some employment that when they do find a supportive workplace, they're more likely to stay with them. Access to wider talent pool. By considering candidates with disabilities, employers can tap into largely untapped talent pool. Many people with impairments have valuable skills and experience that can benefit the organisation. They also, given and making reasonable adjustments such as assistive technology, flexible working schedules or modified workplaces, can help employees with disabilities be more productive. And when people feel valued and supported, they're more likely to be engaged and productive within their work. Improved customer service. So again, people with certain impairments are often able to kind of have a better understanding when serving customers or clients, as they have unique insights into the needs and preferences of some of their customers. Next slide, please. Just some of the barriers that people face when they come to recruitment or selection processes are things like physical barriers, such as inaccessible buildings or transportation. Attitudes as well. They tend to have negative stereotypes or biases towards the recruitment process, and lack of accommodation, such as assisted technology or flexible working arrangements. And most of all, there's limited job opportunities out there because of discrimination or lack of awareness on the employer's part. These barriers can make it difficult for individuals with disabilities to apply for jobs, and let alone be hired into employment. Next slide, please. So we talk a little bit about the Equality Act and what the law says and what needs to happen to have a level playing field when recruiting. And the Equality Act is UK law that protects individuals from discrimination in the workplace based on a range of protected characteristics, including disability. And it requires employers to make reasonable adjustments to ensure that employees with disabilities are not disadvantaged in the workplace. And the purpose of reasonable adjustments is to give that level playing field for disabled employees, to ensure that they have the same opportunities for employment and career progression as non-disabled employees. Under the Equality Act, a reasonable adjustment is any action taken by an employer to remove or minimise the impact of workplace barriers that would otherwise make it difficult for an employee with a disability or impairment to carry out their job. And these reasonable adjustments can be many forms depending on the needs of the individual employee and the nature of their impairment. It's important to note, on balance, that the employer is not required to make adjustments that would impose disproportionate burden on their business. And what constitutes a disproportionate burden will depend on the range of factors that would be taken into account. So this would be things like including the size and resources of the organisation, the nature of the business, and the cost and practicality of the adjustment. However, employers do have a legal duty to consider and make reasonable adjustments for those employees, and failure to do so could lead to legal action under a discrimination claim. But it's important for employers to be proactive in identifying and addressing workplace barriers that may discourage people with impairments applying for roles in their workplace. Next slide, please. So just to go on a bit more about what is required under the Equality Act. So employers must ensure that their recruitment processes are fair and non-discriminative. And job ads, for example, could be that they use encouraging language to encourage people to apply for their jobs that wouldn't disadvantage them from applying, making accommodations within the job ads as well, and obviously encouraging those people to apply. Equally, employers should be cautious as to not indirectly discriminate by advertising in certain areas that could restrict a wider reach of diverse candidates. Application forms, for example, employers must ensure that application forms do not ask for information that could be used to discriminate against a particular group of candidates. Some information relevant to the recruitment process and should not be included. This may be things like a previous sick record or health assessments. Shortlisting and selecting. So employers must ensure that their shortlisting and selection processes are objective and do not discriminate against certain groups of candidates. And if a role requires criteria, employers should not automatically exclude any disabled candidates based on the assumption that they're unable to meet that criteria. So again, it needs to be a fair process throughout. And reasonable adjustments. Obviously, employers must make reasonable adjustments to the recruitment process to ensure that candidates with disabilities are not put at a disadvantage. Next slide, please. I just wanted to share some examples of inclusive job adverts that encourage people to apply for work. And we've seen one there from the civil service. So there, the language that they use helps people to encourage people to apply to their work and disclose if they need any reasonable adjustments. And there's another really good one there from the University of Bath. And by using that inclusive language, it does kind of put a wider reach out to a pool of talent that may not necessarily have applied beforehand. And I think it's really important that these are included on job adverts. So if we go to the next slide, please. I think it's really important about encouraging the disclosure of impairments, because it's an important step to fostering inclusivity and providing appropriate support for individuals with seen or unseen impairments. And these are some key considerations that employers may want to take forward. So create an inclusive culture, so fostering an inclusive environment that values diversity and encourages individuals to disclose disabilities without fear of discrimination. And this can be achieved through internal programs, training programs, awareness campaigns, and inclusive policies. So it's kind of fostering that inclusive environment. Providing clear communication, so making sure that the commitment to diversity and inclusion emphasises that individuals with impairments are encouraged to disclose their disabilities in the recruitment process, and they have that access to provide multiple channels for communication depending on what their impairment might be. Ensure confidentiality, which is quite key, and making sure that any information that is disclosed in regards to whatever their impairment may be is kept confidential. And there's a legal requirement also under the privacy and data protection laws. You've got educate recruiters, so people recruiting. It's good practice to train recruiters and hiring managers to understand and appreciate the value of diversity, including disability diversity. So provide guidance on appropriate questioning techniques and how to facilitate open and comfortable discussions. And then you've got accommodation information. So clearly communicate organisations' commitment to providing reasonable accommodations for individuals. This could be shared on a company website, in job postings, or during interviews. And again, leading by example, so showcase success stories of employees that you've got working with you with impairments and what you've done in your organisation to encourage that. And this again would help alleviate any concerns and encourage candidates to feel more confident about disclosing their disabilities. You've got collaborate with disability organisations, so partner with these organisations or advocacy groups to gain insights and guidance on creating the inclusive recruitment process, and they can provide valuable resources, advice and guidance. But encouraging disclosure is not about making it mandatory for people to disclose their disabilities, but rather creating an environment that they feel comfortable doing so if they choose to. On the next slide is an example by Rolls-Royce, who have made a fact sheet or a guidance sheet on how they make adjustments through the recruitment process. And basically, I won't go through it all now because there's quite a lot of information on there, but it goes step by step and they go into a lot of detail about how they encourage for those applicants to come forward, and they give examples of certain reasonable adjustments to be made. It talks about accessibility, mobility. It talks a little bit about dyslexia and dyspraxia and anxiety. So they've really kind of gone far, forward to encourage those candidates. And I think that's a really good example of maybe how employers could take that forward. Going to the next slide. So moving on to kind of adapting from traditional interviews, there's certain ways that could work for some businesses whereby some people have disclosed that they need reasonable adjustments or they've got certain impairments. So rather than putting them through a traditional interview, it's all about making that person comfortable and being curious about what they can and can't do, what their limitations are. So, things like work trials, so maybe observing them doing the job or setting them some tasks to do that is accessible for them and suitable. Work interviews, so having that conversation with them about the role and exploring how they can meet the criteria for that role and what the company could do to facilitate them doing the role successfully. Video interviews, so you've got technology now where a lot of video calls and video interviews are done, especially with the younger generation. But alternatively, they can share videos of themselves, of the skills and experience that they've done, if they felt confident enough to do that. There are work-based academies, so some hotel chains do like chef academies, where they gain qualifications while developing on the job. So that's a good way forward, and that there is a period of time, so it could be 12 months, it could be 2 years, but it's a really good assessment of how somebody could settle into that job, but also development in that area. And maybe perhaps completing application forms or other paperwork at the end of the process. So getting to know that person, getting to know what they can and can't do and their abilities, and then, filling out the paperwork at the end, perhaps. Next slide, please. So just going back to encouraging statements, I just wanted to share this one with you. So this is a really good one that I found, and I really like this, and I would encourage many employers to maybe adopt this for their recruitment process. And it's really getting people to apply and disclose any reasonable adjustments they may need, or any impairments they may have, and really encouraging that inclusive recruitment process. If we go to the next slide, please. So next slide is about alternatives. So there's a lot of artificial intelligence recruiting, and a lot of bigger companies tend to do this because they have a lot of candidates that come through, and they kind of sift through using these processes. And there's nothing wrong with those processes, but they can be in some ways quite biased and not recognise diverse groups. And therefore, to avoid such bias, alternative methods could be working with local job centres, so having candidates put forward for jobs that match the skill set, employability programs, so linking with such programs that demonstrates that the employer will encourage all applicants. Job fairs and networking events is always good to showcase. Obviously, if you are a disability confident employer, then you can really kind of showcase, this is what we do, this is how we support, and that really gives that encouragement for people to come forward. Partnering with community organisations, people that can demonstrate that you're willing to employ people and look beyond obviously their capabilities. You've got other methods such as social media, and then you've got referral programs. So things like if you've got current employees and they can recommend friends or families or friends of friends, and that's a good way of kind of doing recruitment as well, which is alternative to AI. So the next slide, please. So just finally, I just wanted to kind of share some top tips to take away, really. I think it's really important to educate the people within your current teams about common impairments, but you're not expected to be experts in all disabilities, nor are you trained medical professionals to know about the limitations of disabilities, but to have enough knowledge to understand the reasonable adjustments that should be made and prepared for if they're required. Maybe not nominate a disability champion, so having somebody to act as a champion that will enable to focus and ensure the employer is doing all they can to be inclusive and keep up to date with any changes or new ways of doing things, because technology is advancing every day, and there's been new ways of support for those people to be included within the working environment. Partnering with organisations and specialist organisations to support with employer to gain and offer advice and guidance, and in some ways maybe financial support on making those reasonable adjustments. I think the big one for me is trying to avoid assumptions as well. So although so having conversations with individuals will enable you to understand their barriers and for you to obtain the awareness of how they manage their impairments day to day and how they've managed it in other roles that they may have had. So I think that one's a big one for me, that the assumption that they can't do it. And foster an inclusive working culture by having a culture that embeds inclusivity in their everyday values and principles is attractive to wider talent pool, resulting in a skilled workforce, which makes everybody feel psychologically safe within their work. And use and embed inclusive language. So from following on from the culture, so encouraging the whole workplace to use inclusive language as part of their everyday work will enable that wider talent pool. And providing training and support. So everybody benefits from training and support, and if everybody's got a good understanding of how they can be more inclusive from recruitment right through to making that person successful in their role, I think it's a team effort and it's not always down to the single recruiter. So I think that whole environment and culture is quite key to encourage those people to come forward. And next slide, I think that's it actually.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing some really interesting information there. And I know that we see firsthand from those employers who change their recruitment processes to things like work trials, and some use the academies. It really does impact on our customer success in those roles. So they're definitely things to think about. So thank you so much for sharing. And I think you're staying around to be part of the panel for questions at the end. So
that's correct.
Fantastic, lovely. Well, thank you very much for your time. So we'll have a look at the poll results now from the question that I posed to you around how many working days were lost in the UK due to work-related stress. Do we have the results of those? Okay, so 17 million has come out as the top answer, 24 million next, 9 million, 130 million. Okay, some people had been doing their homework, hadn't they? because yes, the UK lost 17 million working days to work-related stress, depression or anxiety in 2021 to 22. That's according to data from the Health and Safety Executive. So on average, each person took around 18.6 days off work for stress, depression or anxiety. I mean, it's quite a sobering read, really, isn't it? Mental health issues can affect 1 in 4 people at some point in their lives. They have a significant impact on employee well-being and employer productivity. It's absolutely imperative that we have all of these preventative interventions and what that means to employers. Okay, so with that, I'd like to welcome a colleague of mine, our next speaker. So welcome Nikki McFarlane, who is the mental health lead for Seetec Plus. Lovely to see you.
Hello, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So, I mean, it's surprising data, really, isn't it? 70 million people. What do you think are the challenges for employers who are dealing with mental health conditions in the workplace?
Well, I'm going to say I'm not massively surprised because we followed 2021 to 2022, followed the COVID pandemic. So that clearly had a massive impact on people's mental health. And for the first time in a lot of years, mental health actually overtook the musculoskeletal absences. So I'm not actually massively surprised, but yes, it's quite frightening data. So the challenges that are faced by employers when dealing with mental health conditions is they are seeing frequent short-term absences, generally followed by a longer term of absence. So the reduction in productivity due to less workers, there are workers then remaining, picking up that additional workload. So that leads to them having anxiety due to their increase in workloads. You get the staff that turn up with the mental health conditions, which causes what they call presenteeism. They're there, but they're not actually very productive and motivated, which still puts additional burden on their colleagues. So you get that presenteeism there. They're there, but they're not really there. The employers struggle with their limited knowledge and awareness of how to recognise conditions, how to manage people with mental health conditions, because it is that real hidden condition that people are struggling with, and you don't always see it because there's not obvious signs. And obviously, the biggest impact for employers is the reduced customer service, lack of productivity, which actually leads to losses on their bottom line. So they may actually find that they've got a decline in turnover, they've got a higher increase in staff turnover, and that has a massive impact on their profitability.
Absolutely. I mean, but talking about mental health at work can be really difficult, especially for employees to speak up and be destigmatized. So what's stopping employees who need help from coming forward, and how do we encourage this disclosure in the workplace?
You're absolutely right, Jo. There is still a stigma attached to having a mental health condition, diagnosed or otherwise. And we would like to encourage employers to have open conversations, have normalised conversations about mental health and about support that we can provide those colleagues, to foster a supportive workplace culture. So what we encourage is employers to develop mental health champions, provide training, awareness, allyship, so where you can buddy people up to support other colleagues, communicating what support's available within the organisation. We're very, very lucky in Seetec Plus. We have the listening ear. We have an employee assistance programme. We have counselling on offer with our benefits packages. Not all employers have that. So it's really to open that dialogue. Understanding support outside of their organisation that they can signpost to give staff access to the support when they need it at any time, even if it is unfortunately during a working day or in an evening, so they know who to contact. Something we do very well at Seetec Plus, again, is mandatory training for all our new starters, making that training accessible to all, including our participants on programme. We annually review that, okay, and allowing time during our working day to have supportive sessions with those staff members that are undergoing counselling support for mental health conditions.
I mean, you have some people who experience mental health conditions who are just simply too embarrassed to ask for help, and NHS waiting lists get longer. So, how we're supporting disclosure in the workplace, and how do we make our processes easier for these employees?
Well, again, we go back to some of Lisa's presentation, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and it's all about reasonable adjustment. So employers can help any of their staff with any type of diagnosed condition by looking at roles and responsibilities. We look at job carving, finding different ways to achieve the same goals, flexible working arrangements, policy changes around how that can help and how that can impact with staff with mental health, changing the environment that they work in. So that could be a physical environment, putting them into quiet spaces or moving desks, providing additional equipment to support. And to offer specialised employment support, occupational health services, signposting to healthcare professionals, and having that support perhaps come into the workplace to be discussed with employees so that they're not afraid to talk about it, and the employers aren't afraid to offer that support.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's something that we can all take responsibility for in the workplace at the end of the day, isn't it? So what would be your top 3 tips for people who are on this webinar listening in to support people with mental health conditions in the workplace?
Well, I think to access some professional training to recognise the common signs and symptoms of mental illness. You will have, at least we're saying, 1 in 4 members of your staff could have a mental health issue that you're not aware of. So to recognise some common signs and symptoms, know when and how to intervene and offer support to that person. Sometimes you've got to be very gentle with how you approach these guys, and making sure that your staff and managers can access the support and know what's available within your organisation.
Well, some really, really useful information there. So thank you so much, Nikki, for joining us. It's lovely to see you again, but obviously another very, very sobering topic. But there's some really, really good tips there. So hopefully people will take that on board. So thank you.
Thanks, Jo.
Okay, so to move on to our next segment, we'd like to welcome Helen Tite, the founder CEO of I Care, I Move. Now, here she is being interviewed by Pat Taylor, who is one of her work colleagues, around how her team support her neurodiversity conditions.
Hello, I'm Pat from I Care, I Move, and today I'm going to be interviewing Helen. So Helen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly. I am Helen Tite. I'm 51 and fabulous, and only diagnosed as a dyslexic creature in my 20s. So we're going to talk about being neurodivergent and what that looks like. And for me, I run a business. So Pat is going to interview me around the highs and lows of using my crazy brain.
So first of all, we're going to ask you, so Helen, what kind of challenges did you have when you were in education?
Okay, well, could do better. That's the thing that is my overriding banner right the way through education. So it was constantly, you could do better. And I would be working as hard as I possibly could. Yeah. But it just wouldn't come out of my fingertips the way you do in conventional learning. So could do better, very frustrating. And a simple response to a question would not be so cut and dry for me. I would go in different directions. I went off into university, and I'll give you an example. We were asked to do a poster around green and being and the environment. I didn't do a poster. I fully went all out and produced a fashion show. I did the choreography, the planning, the music. That's the way my brain operates. Yeah. So school was always challenging because people didn't understand dyslexia or ADHD or any sort of thinking differently. So it was really hard to fit in. So I did stand out a lot.
So do you think you would have fared better with the right support?
Oh, 100%. Just when people start to understand that you think differently, or how you speak doesn't necessarily come out your fingertips the same way, So you can be verbalize great communication, but the blocker to, in conventional land, you have to write and respond to essays and things. So having people on board that get you and understand what you actually mean, particularly when it comes to the written word, for me, which is my biggest barrier, I can't even begin to tell you how wonderful that is for me, having the right people on my side.
Yeah. So that moves us nicely on to your team. So how does your team help you in the workplace to cope with your neurodiversity?
Well, keeping it simple, the first thing is about barriers. The girls in my team, in my company, talk about grammarizing and glamorizing. So sometimes they just make me just like write it down, just write, and then they will convert that or spell check it, because it looks right to me, but not necessarily it will come across the wrong way to somebody else. So the team will actually sort of just like to support me so I come across well, because the bias is deep.
It is, yeah.
And if you can't spell, you can't run a business.
Yeah.
You still get that type of naff response to it out there.
But it's more than that as well, isn't it? Some of your behaviours, for example. Do you want to talk about some of your behaviours that we recognise now? And that's only been in the last year or so, I suppose, isn't it?
There's a bit of drifting. So when it comes to my behaviours, apparently, we will be deep into a conversation, and the girls will be talking to me, and I will literally drift. I didn't know I did this. So in the old days, they would be like, hello, back in the room. But all it is, my brain is just moving on the sentences and moving on the solutions. So then I sort of jump back into the conversation, unaware that they've paused. And then I can fill the spaces, and then I've actually figured out how we can do the next bit, if you like. I think that's one of many things. Deep focus. So, I mean, my attention, when I go into attention mode, forget to drink, forget to eat. So they off, and I can't break my concentration. So if I'm in hyper focus mode, I can't. They support me in that as well. So there's lots of little things, but they just seem to no. And I'm really grateful. I think that's the other thing. I can't even begin to say how wonderful it is being supported by my team.
Yeah, and I think as a team we've moved on really well, haven't we? Because we've recognised that, and we know that to support you better in your job, we need to be that supportive element of the business so that you can do the work that suits you and that you can do properly. And in those moments of and sometimes it's procrastination because you just can't get your head around it, and you need time to work it through. It is a big one.
So the procrastination bit is a real problem because they think I'm not working on it, but in my head I figured it all out. But it's almost like we've got to kind of almost backtrack to be able to unravel the chaos. To formalise it, so it feels like we're up against deadlines, and then I'm not doing my work, but in my head I've already figured it out, and then it just flows out of me, and that seems to work. Quite a lot. For me, it does. For my team, it doesn't. They get quite stressed about the time management around it.
Yeah, and that was what I was going to say. At first, we would get quite stressed because we were like, oh my goodness, we're not going to get it done. But now we know that it is going on in your head, and you really need to have that time to focus on it and get everything in a place. And then it comes together and you're like, bam, there it is. And it's like, we know you're going to do it now. Whereas before it was quite stressful, and it's learning those techniques and those support systems that you need. So how does it feel as a director? So what kind of strategies and how does it feel as a director of a business then, coping with your neurodiversity and the problems, issues that you face?
I think there's, it's really difficult to put it all into short responses. There's certainly a piece around leadership. So it enables me to lead differently and lead from wherever you need me to be. So the way, traditional way of leading a business tends to look different to where I'm required. It enables me often to be bold and brave because I can't imagine what it's like to be in a non-neurodiverse brain. So this is how I function. So this is how it is. and it enables me to think completely differently and outside the box. So when my team are putting together a project, for example, and they put it in front of me, it's not a good or a bad, it's actually I'll come at it from a different direction, and for that reason it's really nice, because it is literally having like linear black and white and then multicolored woven into it, and for that reason again, you know, it makes for more of a wholesome business. I can't imagine what it'd all be like if we were all like that, dyslexic and neurodivergent. So I'm very grateful to have a real mix of behaviour types within the organisation.
Thank you. And the final one is, why do you think that training in neurodiversity and disability in the workplace and just in general is such an important thing to have in businesses? And like, how would it help that team to grow and the team support?
Oh my God, this is totally my favourite thing, because not one size fits all in any kind of workplace, and it is so important to find people who are right for purpose, and actually when you get the best out of them. So never fear somebody who is on that spectrum, because they've got amazing talent and often high intelligence, and you can get some real magic out of people. So, you know, we're all so different as people, and having such diversity really makes for really solid growth in businesses and great foundations. There's a piece here around, you know, everyone has a chance in life to do something great. Just because they can't spell doesn't make them a bad person or not good enough to do the job. Spelling isn't like really a big deal these days. So the more you understand about working with somebody who is on the spectrum, whether it is Asperger's or ADHD or dyslexia, dyspraxia, just go with it, because you'll be amazed at what talent is there once that trust is in place, and you're off, and you'll never ever regret it, not for a second.
And just making sure that everybody feels part of that team, that sense of purpose and that sense of belonging is really integral, isn't it, to the whole team moving on?
Oh, absolutely. Just anything, the more we know about people who are neurodivergent, I just think it's just making us more well-rounded as a business, and it just really sparks great creativity and great conversation as well.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Sure.
So much there to Helen and Pat. I think we're going to meet them later, which will be excellent to meet them in person. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that story, Helen. So next we'd like to welcome Stuart McManus, who is a neurodivergent practitioner for Seetec Plus, another of my colleagues. Good afternoon, Stuart. Hello, you're here to share you're here to share your experience, I understand, on how encouraging employee disclosure and making reasonable adjustments for neurodiverse people can catapult a wave of change that can benefit both employer and employee.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that video it was wonderful, wasn't it, to hear from somebody that actually has that lived experience of it. So no, fantastic. I'm probably just going to be reiterating a lot of the stuff that was said, to be honest.
Well, we look forward to hearing it. So the floor is yours, Stuart. Go for it.
Fantastic. So you'll hear me probably say this quite often, and I'm sure there's lots of colleagues in the company at the moment that are sick of me saying it. But one of the key things to create an environment for neurodivergent people to feel accepted and to feel able to bring their whole selves to work is literally through better education. We've heard that said before already with the HR people. We heard it in the video a second ago as well. You know, it's making people more aware of all of these conditions and to understand, you know, what they go through on a day-to-day basis and to understand how to bring the best out in them. You know, it runs through the whole company, really. It starts right at the top management and it comes right down to the frontline teams. And the more that we can actually make people aware of what's going on with neurodivergent conditions, the more that we can actually embrace that. and allow people to have the platforms to thrive. So, most people with neurodivergent conditions have perfected the art of masking, which is really quite sad. They hide their conditions from the world, and it's through fear of being stigmatized or being held back from things like promotions and stuff like that, in an environment that just simply doesn't understand them. It's all to do with fear, really. It's sort of, they have their own fear of disclosing what they go through. And equally, the people, the managers, the line managers that don't have that education have a fear of, what happens if I take them on? What happens if I give them this promotion? What if they can't do that? So I think that, for me, education, knowledge, understanding it is the absolute key of how we move forward with this, and realize that they have got this extraordinary amount of skill to be able to bring to business in general. The masking is exhausting. It causes further health complications such as anxiety, depression, RSD, which is rejection sensitive dysphoria, where they just don't feel good enough. And all of those things have a knock-on effect to the other things that we've been talking about so far today, that Nikki was talking about, and things like that. So it's amazing how they all kind of go hand in hand. So, whilst there has been a growing awareness of neurodiversity in the workplace, there's still a great deal of ignorance and stigma attached to being neurodivergent. Many people remain anxious about revealing diagnoses over these fears, and that it will harm their employment or their future career progression. So, and for me, the second main key to this is listening as well, really listening to people. So whilst neurodivergent conditions may fall into categories like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and all of those, every individual has completely different difficulties. They have completely different needs. They have completely different skills. And it's just crucially important that we really listen to what would really help them, and never label them and assume that what's best for them. So I think we just have to really listen to what they need, and how we can help them with that. I think that that's the most important thing so far.
Absolutely. I mean, as you say, this approach is so important, but we need to understand what benefits neurodivergent people can bring to a business.
Yeah, I think the responsibility for that,
I wonder if you can. I came in for an appointment on the 19th of.
So sorry, I think somebody's
April.
got their microphone on. Apologies. Thank you. Sorry about that, Stuart.
No, you're all right. You're all right. So I was just saying that the responsibility falls on all companies and managers across all industries to help to break down the neurodivergent barriers really that are there at the moment, and to aid the sort of general inclusivity and diversity in our workplaces, because the simple changes that we can make can actually benefit everybody. Even those that are neurotypical, those that haven't got mental health problems, it's amazing how we can make these changes, and it can benefit everyone, and make that workplace a much better place to be. So for the fact that, we're sort of in a, particularly at the moment, neuro inclusion has become a global priority. Canada, America, Australia, they're really sort of leading the way with this, but it's really becoming quite big over here. And the importance will only continue to grow over the next few years. 1 in 7 people at the moment are known to have a neurodivergent condition. They expect that to become 1 in 5 over the next 12 months as we sort of, start to be more aware of it, and the diagnosis process becomes a little bit easier to do. So our own government as well are already responding to the importance of this, by sort of commissioning all of these neurodivergent researchers. They've already rolled out a few programs across the country that they're trialing to put the support into place for neurodivergent people, and to find out how we can actually better support people. So, by creating a more empathetic and understanding and knowledgeable environment that is genuinely neuro-inclusive. So, rather than saying you're going to do it, actually doing it, colleagues and service users, so customers as well, with neurodivergent conditions will feel more comfortable and confident in disclosing their condition, and feel much more understood, and able to thrive within their job roles, which I think is a hugely important thing. And some of the benefits that it can bring, it's been touched on already, but improved understanding and empathy. By having neurodivergent people within your teams, they're going to be able to lead the way with actually helping other people, supporting customers, and all of those kind of things. Increased creativity and innovation. You heard that a second ago in the video. They have just such a unique way of thinking. They think of things that maybe other people might not think of. They'll be brave enough to actually put that idea out there, and sort of think outside the box, which I think is just absolutely fantastic. Enhanced problem solving as well. So the hyper focus just causes that sort of really in-depth, sort of delve into a particular problem that you might be facing, and they can come out with all of these different solutions. So improved productivity. When colleagues feel comfortable and supported, they're more likely to be productive. And it's crucial that businesses accommodate the needs of neurodivergent individuals to create that inclusive workplace where they can actually enhance the results or the KPIs or whatever it is that they're challenged to do. They can enhance that, and it can have that knock-on effect again, to other colleagues as well. And again, it was mentioned earlier, it just gives you that sort of, access to a wider talent pool. People are going to feel more confident in actually applying for jobs within your company as well. If you are making a noise about, things like mental health, neurodiversity and stuff like that, and they're going to feel more confident to apply, they're possibly going to apply for those jobs that they would never have applied for before as well. And I think, it's crucially important that we get that set up right from the actual recruitment and onboarding stage as well. So we can do that by making our job adverts more neurodivergent friendly, by thinking about the language that we're using, thinking about different methods of interviewing. So we sort of heard earlier about the work trials or the working days, getting people in, just not sort of sticking to the traditional things all the time, and actually giving them an equal platform to be able to show their skills. And I think that's a huge way forward. So there are so many benefits. I could talk for ages, but I've been told I've only got 10 minutes, so I'm going to cut off there.
I am timing you, Stuart. You're right. No, but you took the words right out of my mouth then, because as you were talking about that wider talent pool, it took me back to Lisa's presentation at the start, where she was talking about the recruitment processes and not following the traditional interview route and being able to offer work trials and people where they can really show their unique skills that they have. So it's so important.
Yeah.
And we have people out there who have a formal diagnosis of a neurodivergent condition or impairment, but for others, they might not realise that they have a condition. So how do we support that individualism in the workplace?
I think it's very similar. I think it's making sure that we have all of those things in place already. The same support is obviously pivotal to those who don't have that formal diagnosis, and that's going to be a very common trait as well over the next couple of years as we sort of try to get on top of all of the neurodivergent conditions and the understanding of them. But it's key for line managers here to have the skills and the knowledge to be able to spot those kind of things. Again, very, very similar to what Nikki said about the mental health side of things. It's such a delicate subject, and it can come as a huge shock to people to find out that maybe they have got a neurodivergent condition or traits of neurodiversity. So I think that I can't emphasize enough just the importance of that sort of education, that knowledge, the manager's toolkits to be able to actually spot these things and have the skills to be able to delicately approach this particular topic. It's one of those things that I think possibly all of us, we could turn around and say that there is an element of neurodiversity. We would all approach a situation completely differently, and that's perfectly okay. But at the same time, a manager that is clued up a little bit more, that can actually spot certain things that are causing maybe a burnout or causing, extreme anxiety over a certain situation, to be able to spot those things and to be able to have that sort of quiet conversation with them to say, do you need some support with this? Is there anything that we can put in place? So unless you have that knowledge and that sort of that education in the background that's already built up, or people that you can refer to with that, then it's going to be very difficult. And that again is going to make people then start to mask again and not maybe investigate that these things that they're struggling with, because it could well be a neurodivergent thing. And again, I think it was mentioned earlier about the disability champions. One of the things that we really need to see more of is neurodiverse champions as well. So they can provide that support to the frontline staff as well, because just recently for me, over the last 12 months that I've been sort of heavily involved in this, the reach out that I've had across the company, where people have sort of gone, look, I think this person's got autism, or I think this person might have Asperger's or something like that, or ADHD, whatever it is, but I don't really know what to do. I don't know what to say to them. I don't know how to approach it. I don't really know what I can do to be able to put things in place for them. So what do I need to do? So again, I think the importance of having specialist people like we do with the wellbeing side of things, and having neurodivergent champions sort of dotted around the organizations would be a really, really important thing going forward. So like I said, most of it I would say is very, very similar. It's one of those things with neurodiversity that the key is in the education and the knowledge side of things. But I think it is just making sure that people feel that they can open up about the struggles that they might have, and that all comes from the environment itself, and making sure that it's talk about those kind of things.
Absolutely. So what would be your best practice tips couldn't get out then, to support neurodivergent colleagues in the workplace?
I think the exciting thing for me with this, after doing lots of research over the last 12 months, is that the support for people with neurodivergent conditions doesn't have to cost companies the world at all. In fact, it can just be simple adjustments that just again, I'm saying it again, but just require knowledge and understanding, really. It's remembering that every neurodivergent person is different and they'll have varying coping strategies and needs. So the biggest tools that we have as employers is the ability to listen. So really listen to the type of support that they need. And whilst this will just be a very, very small sort of snapshot of that, I'm just going to give you a few examples of what you can do and what we've trialed over the last 12 months within Seetec Plus as well to try and help with that. So again, improving the actual knowledge and understanding, making sure that we're talking about this within teams, making sure that, if you are going to be taking on somebody that has disclosed a neurodivergent condition, that the team is actually comfortable with that they actually understand that. What does that mean? What sort of things are they going to have to look out for? How can they support? And really making sure that everyone within the organization has an understanding of really what neurodiversity is, and how it affects people day to day, not just at work as well. You've got to think about their sort of personal lives as well, because it might be something that's happened in their personal life that has caused a burnout or has caused that sort of like that hypertension that they're bringing in. So it might not actually be anything to do with work. So it's really sort of making sure that the training programs that we have around neurodiversity are fit for purpose and actually show you the best practice procedures going forward, and openly discuss those neurodiversity topics within the teams at your huddles, and just promoting that sort of inclusive, empathetic and understanding environment. Improving communication skills, this is a really important one, so verbally and digitally, so being clearer and more concise, avoiding corporate slang, acronyms, jargon, all of those kind of things that maybe they wouldn't necessarily understand. We've sort of moved forward technologically so much over the last, sort of decade or so, and almost to the point now where we are becoming sort of uninclusive towards people, because there are certain things. I mean, even I kind of come to work sometimes and go, what on earth does that mean? And you have to delve deep to try and find that. That can really throw somebody with a neurodivergent condition. So it's making that communication clearer when you're emailing people, making sure that it actually is nice and clear and concise of what you want from that person. When you're at meetings, making sure that there is a structure to that and that you're giving that clear message across. So I think communication is really, really important. And also, again, sort of going back to the knowledge thing, is understanding how to talk to them. So, avoiding certain things when you're sort of, maybe sort of making a reference to something and you use, a different way of saying it. Are they actually going to take that literally and think that they've got to go and do that, or are you sort of, talking hypothetically? So it's avoiding those things. So learning how to communicate with them is a really, really important thing. Introducing some supportive tools, and there are so many gadgets out there. You can find them all everywhere, or you can speak to Access to Work as an example, just to try and find out what there are. But for people with sort of dyslexia, we could get readers. There are different coloured papers that you could put things on, which will actually make it easier for them to understand. There are fidget tools as well for people with ADHD that they may need to actually have a distraction tool to be able to concentrate and keep their focus on things. So it's encouraging those things and actually making it okay to have those within the environment as well. Even sort of throwing things in like quiet areas as well. So I think some companies refer to them as chill out zones, so that if you had quite a stressful meeting and you just need to go and just sort of sit quietly somewhere where it's peaceful and they can actually just sort of be themselves and gather their thoughts and process things so that they can come back with whatever it is they need to do, allowing them the time and the space to be able to do that as well. Some of the other tools that you can get, could be just simple things like ear defenders, or just making sure that the desk areas are away from noisy environments. The hustle and bustle of offices and stuff like that could be quite off-putting for somebody that's struggling with a focus problem. So like I said, a lot of the things that we talk about, they're very, very, very simple to do, and it just requires a little bit of awareness and understanding of what you're up against. The environmental things that we've put into place, I've trialed quite a lot of stuff in our Barnstable office, and they've really, really helped. We've got somebody in our office that has ADHD, and have a desk area, but equally likes to be able to move around as well. So we've created an area where they've got a standing spot as well, so they can walk between their desk and the standing point but still do their work, so that the laptop is able to be used in both areas. So again, it's just being aware, it's listening, and making sure that we're doing what we can to be able to help them. And with neurodiversity, it really doesn't cost the world to be able to put these things into place for people, and the knock-on effect that will have is just phenomenal. The skills that they have are extraordinary. So so very, very simple things that you can do.
Thank you so much, Stuart. There's some really good tips that I think we could all pick up on there. So thank you for sharing. And you only ran over a little bit, so you were fine.
Thanks, Jay.
Okay, so our next segment, I'd like to introduce one of our participant videos. So this is Ryan Collard's story. When Ryan first started volunteering with Devon and Cornwall Food Action, he found talking to people to be quite a challenge. So here's his story.
Hi, I'm Ryan, I'm 23, this is where I work. This is Alan and he's my boss.
Okay, so the food comes from food producers, supermarkets, farmers, most people that are key involved in the food industry. It comes to us or we go and collect it and gets redistributed to people in need. So Ryan came to me earlier in the year, and he's been a significant force in helping us get where we need to get on a weekly basis. So he helps us do everything within the food team. So for Ryan, he's come a long way since you first met me, haven't you?
Oh yes, I have.
And for us, he's been a key member of the team. And I would say to any employer, give someone a chance.
Yeah.
An awesome opportunity for employers to shine, because Ryan has just been, for me, formidable.
This is Stacey, my advisor from Plus.
Hi, I've been working with Ryan since June of this year. When I first met Ryan, he was working 1 day a week at the hub, and he's now working 2 days a week, and obviously thoroughly enjoying it and doing really well. Ryan's also now attending our woodwork unit at Scott Business Park, and Ryan's come on absolutely leaps and bounds in his confidence. I'm always met with a big smile and a great greeting from him whenever I see him.
This is my mum, Nicola.
Volunteering here has been a brilliant experience for Ryan. It's such an inclusive environment. He was very bored and very lonely over lockdown. His previous provider had retired and he was left without provision, so he didn't have any outside interaction outside the home. Me and his dad, that was all he had. So we came here, and Ryan really, really quickly became part of the team. They are very inclusive here, very friendly, and take Ryan at face value, so let Ryan be who he is, and give Ryan the space he is to be part of the team. Ryan is very work focused. He does need a purpose. He needs to get up in the morning and have something to do, a clear goal for the day. We've looked at voluntary work, and he's been volunteering in different places since he was 14 with support from either his father or I. A lot of places aren't very inclusive. Sometimes we've faced a bit of discrimination. There have been times where Ryan's been marginalised, maybe given tasks to do away from the main group. Maybe there's been times where people have not included him in the conversation because they felt that because he doesn't speak very well, that he couldn't understand, so they've excluded him. There's even been times when break time we've been asked to go and sit in a different area and not been included with the main group, which was really, really sad.
What I like working around here is helping everyone, like sorting bread and making fruit and veg bags, dairy bags, and moving pies and pasties around. This is why we should fill bellies, not bins.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for presenting that. What a fantastic job you did. And I really enjoyed hearing about your story, and well done. And so thank you also to the Devon and Cornwall Food Action team for allowing us to film that. That was absolutely fantastic. Okay, I'd like to welcome our next guest speaker along. So I'm looking to welcome Andy Swan, who is Employment Manager for the Royal National Institute of Blind People. Good afternoon, Andy.
Hello, Joanne. How are you?
Hello, good. I know you've been waiting patiently for your slot, so thank you very much. Thank you. So I've got some questions for you, but first of all, can you tell us about the services that the RNIB offers to support employers?
Yeah, of course. I mean, a lot of people have heard of RNIB. We've been around for a long time now, and we were originally set up to work with blind people, and now, of course, we work with anyone who has anything going on with their sight. So people who are partially sighted, blind, and people who are just having difficulty with their sight. So the kind of services that we offer for employers include, well, I'd love to say go to our web pages, but at the moment they're not very clever. We're reviewing the whole lot just now. But if you go to RNIB's website and just search for employers, you'll find some information there on quite a things that we do. So some guidance on helping you to recruit people, to hold on to your staff that you have at the moment, to talk about common things like risk assessment and training. So that's all on the web if that's your thing, but we're also on the end of the phone. So we really welcome people to phone us. We're there 6 days a week. Quite often, a one-off piece of advice is enough to give you the guidance that you're looking for. But if not, we have specialist employment advisors that can dig a bit deeper with you and help you with any issues that you come across. We also have some good leaflets that are there, like our Let's Work Together leaflets. So if you've got a specific thing you're looking for, we'll try and help you. If you're thinking a bit more strategically about how your policies and your procedures to recruit people with sight loss and to retain them, we have the Visibly Better Employer standard as well that we're happy to take you through. It has quite a few similarities with Disability Confidence. So yeah, we try and be there all the time electronically and as often as we can on the phone or by email.
That's a fantastic range of support there. Thank you for sharing. So why is it important for employers to consider the loss of eyesight in the workplace?
Well, there's a lot going on, politically. Also, when you look at the breakdown of the workforce at the moment, I mean, even since the year 2000, twice as many people over 65 are working. So we have an older workforce. At the same time, I can't keep track of the state pension age because sometimes it's 67 and then it's going up to 68 and then sometimes it's not. But the general trend is that the state pension age is increasing. So again, more people will be working later in age. And a third of people, regardless of their age now, they already expect to stay in their job with the same hours once they reach state pension age. So our workforce is getting older. The politics recently have been about attracting people over 50 back to work. So if someone has retired but is coming back into the workplace, they're looking for a different organisation. They want more support and advice than they might have earlier in their career. So if we add all these things up, our workforce is older than it used to be. It's getting older, and people acquire sight loss and as they're older as well. So whereas in the past it was quite obvious that there were some people who are blind and some people are partially sighted, the reality now is there are more people with different kinds of sight loss in the workplace than there have ever been before.
Absolutely. And for those who are unsure, can you just advise us what is meant when we say the term sight loss?
Yeah, of course. I'm not talking to someone here like myself who needs glasses on to read something. I'm talking about that in not too distant past, we talked about people being registered blind or people being registered sighted, and people registered partially sighted. People still use those phrases, and that's fine. People talk about being visually impaired. The people who have registered in the last few years will be registered sight impaired or registered severely sight impaired or certified sight impaired. So there are lots of different phrases there, but basically we talk about people with sight loss, meaning anyone with a sight becomes an issue in their day-to-day life or their work.
Okay, thank you. And could you give us any examples of how employers might make reasonable adjustments for sight loss?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we have a short time scale today, so I'm not going to dig too deep with these, but often changes don't have to be complicated or expensive. A lot of people are used to working with their sight the way it is, so people might be looking for you to change text size in documents or changing the formats of colours or documents, or people may need a bit of software in the computer that allows them to change the way it looks, or alternatively listen to the content rather than looking at it. So it could be software. People use things like video magnifiers or portable document readers. People may be looking for a bit of flexibility about travel. There may be some people need value human input and might need support workers in some environments. So I don't want you to think that employing someone with sight loss means a lot of change and a lot of expenditure. But if someone does need significant changes, then remember DWP's Access to Work scheme is there to help financially. They have had some difficulties in the last year with delays, but they're working on bringing that back up. But we've had a lot of inquiries in the last year where people just want a bit of advice and support to tide them over until the more significant changes come in.
Okay, and not to put you on the spot or anything, Andy, but have you got any top tips for employers to take away from today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first one, it's surprisingly common, is just not to make assumptions. We've tried to help quite a few employers who have said, "Oh, yeah, someone used to work here. They had difficulties with their sight. We had to do this, or we had to stop them doing that." And even people with exactly the same eye condition will have different practical effects. So people's functional vision might be quite different. So if you're dealing with thorny issues like assessing risk, then it can be a bad mistake to say, well, if this person needed this done, then this person will need it as well. So please don't make assumptions. The second tip is always ask an individual. Now, particularly at recruitment stage, for example, it's something you should always do is say, okay, you're coming for an interview, do we have to do anything differently? It's very easy for someone to turn up, to present them with a written test, and the individual says, "Oh, I didn't realise, I can't see that." And you say, "Well, okay, we'll forget about the test now then, just come and do the interview." And although you're trying to be helpful with that, you're kind of not judging someone in the same way. So it's very easy to make mistakes there. So asking the individual, what might you need at the interview? And when the job's offered to someone, ask again, what do we need to do differently to make this job work for you? And it could be not very much, or it could be there's more of a process involved there. And I think my third tip would be just ask RNIB if you need any help. We're always welcome phone calls to our helpline. And if it's just a piece of anonymous advice about what would I do if, we'll give you that. And if you want us to go into greater detail, yeah, we'll talk to you about how we can help you with that.
Fantastic. And then am I right in thinking that you offer free online e-learning services as well?
Yes, we've got a suite of packages for e-learning which are really good. And I'm not saying that just because I work for RNIB. I know from the feedback from people, we have some for job seekers. We have some for employment professionals, people who are helping people find jobs. But quite importantly, we have one specifically for employers, and that will take you through, what is sight loss? What does it mean? What do I need to do differently? How do I get help? And even touching on things which are difficult to do in e-learning, with things like how to guide someone, some basic advice. So the understanding sight loss for employers and for work colleagues is there available to you now. It's free and it's a high standard. Big challenge is finding it. So as I said earlier, if you go to the RNIB's homepage, do a search for employers in our search function, it will take you to a page that has a simple registration for our e-learning, and it's well worth a look.
I will make that one of my priorities later this afternoon. That definitely sounds like something to look at. Thank you so much for joining us, Andy. That's been full of really useful information. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, to everyone watching, if you haven't sent your questions in yet, now is the time. Pop one in the chat. I think we might see the QR code make another appearance for you to scan as well, so you can give us some feedback on today's event. Please do, that would be great. And if you also want to pop in the chat, if there are any actions or tips you would like to take away from today. So yes, if you go on to that now. Now, there's been a bit of a drama behind the scenes here with fire alarms and office evacuations and all sorts happening. But Beth is actually here, thankfully. So you made it, Beth. You made it back.
I made it. I almost didn't. I mean, you have to forgive me. I'm probably still quite out of breath from traipsing up 5 flights of steps to get here, but we're here and I made it. It's all right.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, I'm just going to say over to you. Have we got any panel questions from our audience today?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really great to be a part of this today, even though I did miss a little bit of it, so do forgive me. But it's been really great session, really inspiring speakers and really useful topics. So yeah, it's been a pleasure to be a part of. So on to some of the questions. One question that we got through in the chat, which is quite a generic question. Anybody who would like to answer it, feels they have the answer to this and can provide some information, please do feel free to chip in. And that is, what inclusivity training provider would you recommend to ensure inclusive language and practices are used throughout the company? I think this question came in when Nikki McFarlane was speaking, so I don't know, it may be directed to you, Nikki, but if there's anybody else that feels they would like to jump in, I'll repeat that again. What inclusivity training provider would you recommend to ensure inclusive language and practices are used throughout the company? Any takers? Hi, Nikki.
I wasn't gonna jump in because I thought somebody else might want to chip in, to be honest with you. Really, you've got to find a reputable organisation that can support with things like mental health first aid. Clearly, I'm going to say Seetec Plus, clearly, because we are an inclusive employer, we provide that type of training. But anybody that provides things like mental health first aid training, mental health champion training, anything like that, it doesn't have to be us. We are probably one of the better companies to choose, but to be fair, getting a reputable organisation that's not, I don't mean to disrespect anybody, any charities organising training, but the freebies tend to be not quite as inclusive as you'd want them to be. And sometimes the dialogue isn't as up to date as you'd want it to be. So it's really just finding a good, reputable company that can provide that mental health training. Training up champions in your business, whether you do it mental health first aid or otherwise, is probably your best route forward.
Great, thank you, Nikki. That's great. Another question we have for Helen, who I believe was on earlier during the video. How do you make reasonable adjustments for people with varying conditions and impairments in training sessions or your group induction your induction groups? got Helen on the call.
Hello, I'm here, Pat.
Hiya. Hi, Pat.
Hi. Thank you for your question. So we're a small team, actually. So our induction consists of kind of the roles and responsibilities, and just working towards that open discussion about how we work, how our behaviours affect each other in work. So we don't actually have a structured induction as such. It's more about how we work as a team, how we respect each other, and how we can work together to make our team work to its maximum potential. We have an open language here. We have open sessions where we can have that opportunity to talk to each other, but also individually, and that's really encouraged. So we don't let any issues become big issues. We tackle them straight away. And yeah, if anybody comes to join us, then we take on board any problems they have, any whether that's mental, emotional, physical, whatever. And we're really open to listen to those and to take on board how they might be feeling and how it might affect their work. So.
Thank you. That's great, Pat. Thank you very much for answering that. A question for Stuart. What methods do you recommend to ensure that we measure inclusion at work, and to make that meaningful as well?
What measures do we make? Here at Seetec, we've got focus groups, which will actually look at each individual condition itself, which I think is really, really important. It's sometimes on the actual groups themselves, it's people with lived experiences of that as well, just to make sure that representation is there for them, which, I think the key, again, I'm going to say it again, Joe, I think it is just education. It is just knowledge, education. It's driving that home from the top down, making sure that your teams are fully aware of all the different conditions that are out there, and having that open dialogue, with people about things like that. So it's having that representation. Every company, be it large or small, is going to have people within that organization that maybe have mental health problems or maybe have a neurodivergent condition, maybe from the LGBTQ community. So it's using the people that you've got there to actually, gain the insight from them as to what their lived experiences are. And I think that's the biggest asset that any company has, is to actually delve into those lived experiences. So, set up focus groups, make sure that you're regularly talking about inclusivity within huddles and stuff like that, and making sure that the topic just doesn't get brushed away. That's the key thing with all of this at the moment. These are really, really crucial talking points. They're not going to go away anytime soon. They're never going to go away, and it's making sure that you respond in the best way. Better way to do that than to actually involve people that are living those experiences as well.
Right, yeah, thank you, Stuart. That's really good insight. Question for Nikki again, if you wouldn't mind coming on. So would you say that there are generational influences to mental health conditions at work? So for example, young people are facing kind of different barriers and different points in their life that might be a challenge compared to perhaps people later in life than them, and how do you think employers could go about managing that and kind of considering that in their workforce?
Yeah, thanks, Beth. I did some work on this recently, which was really interesting, ranging from, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of terminology, but Generation Z, so Gen Z, so that's your late teens to mid 20s, because they were leaving school, taking exams perhaps during COVID. The mental health barriers that come out in that age range is things like lack of confidence, loneliness, isolation, certainly some anxiety and lack of work preparedness. And that seems to be a big thing. When I talk about the local skills improvement plans, you've basically got lack of work preparedness comes out in the youngsters in a huge way. Your millennials, your late 20s to late 30s, the issues facing those guys are things like the cost of living crisis, lower earnings, women at perhaps disadvantaged because they're having children and they've gone back to work part-time, and there's high childcare fees. So finances and cost of living tends to impact that generation more so. Generation X, your late 30s, early 50s, I'd love to put myself in that category. Not quite, just a little bit over. So again, women disadvantaged because of childcare arrangements, because the children haven't quite left school yet, so they're not actually earning any money. Women going through menopause during that period can affect their working habits, and again, things like memory is impacted, or that general menopause fog, I think we call it. Again, that bracket of people tend to develop their longer term health conditions during that period of time. And we're talking again about that 1 in 4 with mental health, and you've got again 1 in 5 with musculoskeletal issues. So also 33% of that age group is pre-diabetic or diabetic. So that's a huge fact. And that's from the Office of National Statistics. So they develop chronic illnesses during that period between 30 and mid 50s. And then you've got your baby boomers, your over 55s. Now, interestingly, lack of daily care, serious medical conditions, and the lack of health and well-being in that group is the largest affected groups, which is why we do a lot of focusing on your over 55s for work and employability. Also, believe it or not, they have a higher alcohol consumption in that group. So that's maybe where I sit. I'm not sure. I'm not a drinker, really. So it's really interesting information when you look at what general impacts each generation has. So thanks for asking that question, Beth. That's brilliant.
No, I'm glad I did. I found that really fascinating myself, actually. It is really interesting to know, it is, and it's really real life. I think everybody in a period of that category that they sit in can really relate to that, and actually it just shows that everybody is going through something, no matter what age you're at and what stage of your life and your career that you're at. So yeah, that was really interesting. Thank you, Nikki. Question for Lisa: what would be the starting point on how to promote diversity and inclusion in the workplace? How do people kind of get started with that and get the ball rolling?
Sorry, I was having technical issues and I couldn't get my camera on.
No worries.
I think it starts with the current, where you are currently, and identifying, and I think as a starting point, I think it's good to have input from the people that work on the ground, and to kind of get feedback on ways, because they may have experiences outside of work that they can bring as ideas. So actually involving your people within the workplace is really key to kind of building that plan and building up that inclusivity and diversity within the workplace. And then from that foundation, you can then kind of expand on to working in partnership with other companies, places like Seetec Plus, or other charities and things like that. And I think it's starting with what you've got and building on those foundations.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Lisa. Definitely. It's a really good start, good place for people to make a start on trying to be a bit more inclusive in their workforce.
Yeah.
And we have one more question for Andy. So Andy, what adjustments do you suggest when supporting people with sight loss through the disclosure process?
I suppose that one depends really on the context. If we're talking about someone who is just applying for a job, then a statement that kind of explains why you want to know a bit about their sight will make the difference. There's nothing worse than one of those tick box things that you get when you're applying for a job that say tick here or tick there. I think for someone who's further into their job, who may be having difficulty explaining what's going on, then I think the message is probably the same, that people need to know the reason why people are asking and that help is there. And that, that will encourage people to open up a bit more about the situation and what kind of support they need. I hope I've understood that question correctly there, but hopefully that's answered that one.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Andy. Really useful. So that's all of the questions from our end. So I'm going to hand back to lovely Jo to close us off. But thank you. It's great to be a part of it. Really good questions. And thank you for all of your input.
Thank you so much, Ramia, and thank you, Beth. I'm very glad you made it back to the building with those questions. So thank you very much. And great questions. And I was also really fascinated by the answer that Nikki gave and the research that she'd looked into the generational. Although, as I sit firmly in that Gen X category, it's a bit disheartening to know that it seems to be all downhill from here on, but there we go. I'll try and keep a smile on my face. No, there's been a lot of information to take in today. Don't forget, you're not alone. If you want any disability confident information or advice on how to access a wider pool of applicants, either pop your email in the chat, starting with @JaneForrest with 2 R's, or scan the QR code, pop it on your feedback form, and we will be in touch. So it just leaves me to say thank you again for tuning in. From all of us at Seetec Plus and Chaos TV, we look forward to seeing you again for part 2 on the 29th of June at 1 p.m. Tickets are available on Eventbrite, and have a great afternoon.